Love that. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out today. Welcome to the Bethesda Green Innovation Lab Summer Speaker Series, where we tackle environmental challenges through sustainable entrepreneurship. During this series, we're discussing ideas that impact people, the planet, and profit. My name is Emily Bernard. I'm the program manager of the Innovation Lab here at Bethesda Green. And really, I just want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Today, we're going to be discussing green infrastructure and some of the innovation used to green our urban spaces. Of course, I'd like to take just a minute to introduce you to our work here at Bethesda Green, which we organize under two primary categories: Be Green Business and Be Green Living. The Be Green Living program elevates community engagement and enhances the quality of life for local residents through projects like our efforts to improve stormwater management, promote street-level recycling, and improve access to green space. Under our Be Green Business program, we support leaders who are building for-profit models around innovative and sustainable solutions to tackle environmental and social challenges. We welcome mission-aligned idea stage through seed stage startup companies to join our innovation lab. And I invite anyone who is ready to join our exciting community to grab some food and drink and chat with me afterwards if you'd like to learn more. And of course, before we jump into today's panel, I'd like to acknowledge our amazing network of partners and sponsors for supporting us in the work that we do, and that includes our speakers who have volunteered their time to be here today. So let's go ahead and get started. With 2/3 of the world's population expected to live in cities by 2050, businesses are looking for ways to grow and help their cities thrive sustainably. Green infrastructure, which ranges from green roofs to living architecture to smart buildings, seem to be an answer to our urbanization issue. By mitigating air and water pollution, regulating temperatures, and fostering biodiversity, green infrastructure enhances our quality of life and resilience against climate change. And with that, today we're welcoming Brad Dockser, who is the founder and CEO of Green Generation, a Bethesda-based company working at the intersection of sustainability and real estate by helping clients make strategic investments to create financial and environmental return. Jörg Breuning, who is the CEO of Green Roof Technologies, a Maryland-based company with the mission to provide clients with trustworthy and world-class knowledge through ethical and affordable service for all of your green roofing needs. And finally, Tilley, the CEO and founder of Canopies, an Innovation Lab alumni company focused on developing environmentally friendly infrastructure, such as their living umbrella, and more recently with their cool green bus shelters. I also want to take a moment here to mention that Dave is here in two capacities. Dave is also an associate professor at the University of Maryland through the Environmental Science and Technology Department. So Dave kind of wears two hats here today.
See them here.
Amazing. All right. So to get started today, what I really want to kind of at the ground level, what I'd like to start here with is, how do you expect the demand and implementation of various forms of green infrastructure? Because I know that the three of you probably define it a little bit differently. How do you expect those to expand and develop by 2050, particularly with climate change as a consideration? And we can go ahead and start anywhere, and the three of you will pass it around.
Well, I think converting cities with more green is also goes hand in hand with getting rid of the cars, for example. So I think there's too much individual traffic in the cities, what I have seen and experienced, and that makes the quality of life, not only from the atmosphere I'm breathing, but also from the noise, from the risk that you get hit by a car, and all these things are very difficult. So I think cities have to find ways to reduce the amount of individual traffic, parallel increase public transportation.
Absolutely.
So I think one is 2050 is not too far away if you really think about it. But I think there's a lot of signals that there's going to be more and more need for green infrastructure, more demand. I can see that from our student body at the University of Maryland. There's a sustainability minor that has hundreds of people majoring in that, getting majors in environmental science. Students really love these projects. So I think there's a new generation that really thinks about farm to table and urban agriculture and how you can use natural systems to solve environmental problems. So I think there's a real demand. Well, obviously this summer with all the heat problems that have been obvious to us and the rainstorms we've had, the larger size hail that we're having, these storms, all part of climate change. And nature really offers us an ability to solve a lot of these problems in creative and inexpensive and ecological ways.
So I'm going to take a slightly maybe more macro sort of approach to the question, because I think there's no question there's been a massive acceleration in interest and investment in climate, sustainability, resilience, however you want to think about it, it's expanding. The growth that we're seeing is really coming from a couple of places. First and foremost, I think most people we work with are simply finding that investing in climate is profitable. And so they don't have to necessarily say, we're doing it for the good of the world. That's a co-benefit. They're doing it because it drives the value of their business. It drives their fees, it drives their access to capital, it drives their participation in the profitability, the carried interest. But I think there's two big trends that we're seeing. One is increasing regulation. We haven't seen, and that won't limit this to the prior administration, we haven't seen necessarily massive leadership at the federal level. In the US, the action is at the cities. Mm-hmm. Cities are unabated in their quest for more climate. Whether it's BEPS in Washington, Local Law 97 in New York, BERDO in Boston. We're sitting in a county which was the first county to have benchmarking in the nation, the first green bank at the county level. It's happening every which way, and that is going to create winners and losers. It's essentially going to be a de facto carbon tax. It's a taking of some of your equity, and if you approach it right, the value of your asset goes up. If you approach it wrong, your asset may have an impaired value. I think the other thing that we're seeing is the capital markets. Most of real estate, most of the built environment depends on access to somebody else's money. Whether it's a mutual fund, a pension fund, an insurance company, a sovereign wealth fund, and they for the most part have recognized that they now have a lot of weight, and they're simply demanding more focus on climate if you want access to their capital. And so, our clients are the Blackstones, the KKRs, the Starwoods, the Allianzes, the Deutsche Banks of the world. All of them are raising money from other people, and they're finding that their access to capital, if they address climate change, is enhanced. They can get more money. If they don't, they're actually going to potentially find themselves shut out. And so the capital markets, not only the equity but the debt, the lower cost of mortgage on the residential side, Fannie and Freddie will give you a lower cost mortgage if you do certain things. So we see these as two big drivers with the recognition that it's simply profitable. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Canopies, green roofs, cities are thinking about it, private owners, residential, but it's all encompassing. And I would just make the final point is, I have no doubt in my mind that the direction is set. The only thing we're ever arguing anymore about is the velocity. Mm-hmm. The direction is set. There's no government, no individual, nobody's going to change that. We're just arguing about, do we get there by 2025 or 2030 or 2040? But it's clear where we're going, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's not about if we're going to get there, it's when we're going to get there. That's the point of contention at this point. So you kind of started going there, so I do want to ask this project so that as we're talking about these green infrastructure projects, you as audience members have in your mind an image, a picture of what kind of things we're discussing here. So what are some examples from each of your perspectives of successful green infrastructure projects, and what can we learn from them? And then also, for your specific case, I want to ask, how do some of those building operations and efficiencies factor into those projects as you've seen them? Take it how you wish.
You want me to start again? Like I'm the first in the alphabet with the last name, but
you've got lots of great examples.
Yeah, I start always from the top down, so to speak. We wanted to start from the bottom up, but obviously I'm doing green roofs, and I think it's very easy to look at Google Maps and look at a city and you see only basically asphalt and flat roofs. You see a couple trees in the middle of the building, and as I came today from Rockville, but also in Bethesda, when you drive through, on this level everything looks very nice. You have some trees, they have freshly planted trees, they are a little bit embarrassing. They could have used bigger trees from start with, but it's all good and it all goes there. But when you look from a bird's eye view, and this is I think the key element how we have to look at our cities, when you look from the bird's eye view, you don't even see these trees anymore in this small rows in between the buildings, but you see endless flat roofs. Some people make them white because then they think it is better and it reflects, which is all a lot of marketing behind it, but has nothing to do with reality. But if we just do what was in this place at first, before the building was built, and we take that and put that up on the roof, then our environmental footprint from a bird's eye view would be almost zero. Sure, we need some space for air conditioners and stuff like that, but I have worked on projects where all these mechanical units are completely hidden within the building, and where the entire footprint of the roof is at the end a green roof with a usable space where even people can hang out on a lawn, or where they have a playground for kids on a green roof, or even a little cafe up there. So this is all possible, and it's not utopia. It is just existing, and this exists for, I would say, many, many hundred years. Even the Romans had their gardens on the roof at some point. And I don't want to talk about the hanging gardens because nobody has seen them other than in a drawing. But the idea was always there. And the denser a city gets, the more green. I think the green is only what people hold in a city. In New York, it's the central part, but people are getting tired of that also. They need to have more, and they want to have more little central parks that might be connected, where they can connect. And yeah, so from my perspective, if you look from a bird's eye view on a city, then there is a huge potential to green that. And this greenery, even if it's just a very shallow greenery, what we call an extensive green roof, it's not very thick and has only some succulent type of plants, even this greenery helps with the climate, but it foremost helps with the stormwater runoff. And the stormwater runoff in all cities is the biggest problem. I don't know how much Baltimore pays every year in fines to the EPA. I knew it from Lancaster. It was millions of dollars, where they then it was cheaper for them to get credits or to get a loan to build green infrastructure to reduce their runoff, and it paid back in 5 or 6 years. So it is all possible. Long story short, I think the roof places, the roof areas, they have a huge potential to help the cities in the first place with the usable space. And I would be, and this comes to the federal level, sorry when I talk a little bit too long, but I think I would be very strict as a president, and I would just demand that every building needs to be able to support a green roof, whether the people put it on it or not, but you have the option. Right now it's the opposite way around, that even large construction companies from warehouses, these are the heating zones outside the city that bring the heat already in, the preheated air, that they are trying to cut down on their structural load because they say we have not so much snow anymore. This is exactly the wrong way. I think this should go exactly in the opposite direction, where they need very simple requirements. You need to have enough structural load for a specific green roof. Whether you do it or not, it's your problem, but this is what we require, because then the additional cost for the green roof wouldn't be that expensive anymore.
Sure. And Dave, from your perspective, what is...
Yeah, I was thinking about this locally, but also kind of globally as well. So I think locally, a couple of good projects that I know of that have been around for a number of years are, one is the Eastern Village in Tacoma Park. It's a nice green wall project that was installed in I think the late 90s. It's really a formidable amount of vegetation on a building right there on Eastern Avenue at the border of with DC. And then a project that I worked on personally that really is a good demonstration of a lot of these technologies was the Solar Decathlon project that the Department of Energy supports. And the University of Maryland participated in this as they had in many years, but in 2011 we actually won the competition. We named the house Watershed because it was a butterfly design and it actually captured the water and used that to with a green roof and solar panels and to feed a constructed wetland to treat the water and a bioretention rain garden cell to also to treat the water. It's such a successful project that the power company Pepco bought that and used that as the basis of their sustainability center up on Goody Drive. So that's still in existence after all these years, and they've used that, I think, well. They're probably going to use it a lot better in terms of getting outreach to the communities. And then I was thinking, like, nationally, there's some good resources. Greenroofs.com is a kind of a news outlet that's put together by some folks from the green roof industry that really highlights a lot of the great projects around the country and internationally. And then the trade organization for green roof and green walls is called Green Roofs for Healthy Cities. They're based in Toronto. They have a website, greenroofs.org, but they host a couple of conferences, Cities Alive. They use that to go around to different cities. Cities are really active, it's a place to be with green infrastructure. So that's some really good resources to look at, I think, locally and then on the web as well for these kind of technologies.
Awesome. Thank you. And Brad, finally, what does a successful project look like to you from the building level view is my assumption?
So I love that question because when we start talking to people, we always start with what is success? Because some people want to basically just have a building that's worth more money or a company. Some people want to reduce their carbon. Some basically, listen, they love those things, so they need to raise money, and so they don't have a good answer. They need a better strategy before they go to market. And our view is that we can get to all three, but meeting somebody at their starting point, like what matters to them, what's important to them, is really important. I'll make sort of an interesting point because I think this is kind of interesting. The larger you get in terms of sort of the size of the system and the solution, the more efficient it becomes. So it's great, stormwater runoff at a building level is one thing. When you can start talking about a district, it's very different. And I'll use parks as an example. DC used to basically require 10% of every project have green space. At Union Market, that meant there were 17 different projects that had little tiny pocket parks. Nice, fine, not very efficient. What would have been more efficient, DC asked 3 years too late, was how do we fix this? And well, a central park, having a large green location that provides a community asset would have been much better. Didn't, as we all know, Union Market, it's not happened. From a stormwater runoff point of view, you do not want to be, at the southern end in a storm because the water comes down fast and furious. It's concrete. It's about 7 degrees of slope. It's scary at the end because, again, nobody was thinking about the infrastructure. Everyone's focused on their projects. And I think that's where cities are really good at. They're better at systems thinking. You made an interesting point that I want to just touch on. Building codes are a stealthy way to address a lot of climate. And people, when a city says we're going to change the building code, 3 people show up, and they can get to ramp through a lot of stuff. It used to be that basically building systems always had to be in the basement, subterranean. There were a lot of reasons that turned out to be bad, and people wanted to start putting cogen and gen sets and on upper floors, and that wasn't always allowed. So this is an interesting place where communities can do a lot of good work. Building codes are a place where there's been a lot of industry focus right now. What's possible, what's permissible. You define green infrastructure somewhat narrow, and I forgive you for that. But in some respects, the nomenclature that we're using around sustainability and climate and greenhouse gases and carbon, it is super broad. And a lot of people would say green infrastructure includes renewables, it could include hydrogen, it includes, ports and airports and transportation. It's really broad, but that's also where the opportunity comes from. as opposed to sort of one person sort of saying you have to address just this. You know, green roofs, I think they're most successful, and maybe I'm wrong, are in places where the building code requires it. Chicago, for instance, tremendous, you know, I think more green roofs than any other part of the city, maybe DC's right there. That's because the building code required it. You know, Mayor Daley basically said you have to do green roofs. It impacts our stormwater runoff. It improves the quality of life and the health of our river system. So there's a lot of knock-on effects. And I think, you know, where we've had the greatest success is when we expand stakeholders, when we expand sort of the different people and think not just about energy, but we think about insurance, which is we could do a week's worth of discussion on resiliency and insurance. Big play now, because some people used to say it was about the cost of insurance. I think we know in the last few months it's about access to insurance at all, with companies leaving the market completely in California, in Florida. And we've got some of our clients who are saying, should we not be investing at all in South Florida? Because, you know, no insurance, no debt. You know, if you lose your insurance, you have a default under your mortgage about 1 second later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. I think what I'd like to move to now is I want to get into a little bit more specifics on each of you. So for this, I'm just going to ask a question directly to each of you to get to the heart of where your perspective comes from. And I do appreciate you calling me out about
very gently
my definition of green infrastructure. It was something that we discussed. Should we start the session off with our definition? I kind of hoped by bringing in these three experts from these three different perspectives, you could recognize where we were coming from this. I don't discount at all that green infrastructure has many different definitions and many different applications as well. For today, we're focusing on you guys, so you're welcome. So Dave, I want to go ahead and start with you, actually. And I would like you to tell me a little bit, first of all, about Living Canopies' two products, and then also how can businesses creating these living architecture collaborate with urban planners to design solutions that integrate visually and effectively into our urban landscapes?
All right. So, so about 2015, I was sitting on a pool deck in Las Vegas. It was June. It was like 115 degrees. I was with my family. The kids are in the pool enjoying it. My wife's sunning herself. She's loving it, and I'm miserable. I look around the patio and just looking for some shade. It's the fancy hotel that has the Eiffel Tower. I forget what it's called. But there's no umbrellas on this patio. It's a beautiful patio. But there's this one little tree and this tiny little planter in the corner. And there are like 20 people huddled around this planter to get into the shade. And at some point, I've been working with, with green roofs and green walls and constructed wetlands my whole career. And at that point, some reason it just hit me is like, why don't we put plants on umbrellas? So I thought it's kind of a crazy idea. Brought it to my wife. She's like, no, that seems kind of cute, I could see that. Brought it back to the University of Maryland, to the patent office, and they're like, yeah, this is something we can get you a patent for, and we can put you in the business school. We have this NSF I-Corps program that we just started. So at that point, I started Living Canopies and really developed the Living umbrella as a commercial product. Spent a lot of time in I-Corps and customer discovery. It ultimately made my way here to Bethesda Green in 2019 and participated in the accelerator. We've commercialized it. So some mixed success, I would say, over the years. COVID was not kind to us, I would say. We had just gotten into Sam's Club in 2019, and then COVID hit, and they're like, well, let's hold off. So we had to wait until 2021. We tried that with some success, but it really kind of did reinforce that there is a market for it, and we'd sold them to different locations around the country. But during COVID, and then with all the things that were happening with all the loss of life, like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and these just devastating things are happening to certain segments of the population, really was hitting me hard. And I have teenage daughters, and they were bringing this back to me on a daily basis. They're very socially concerned. And I thought, what can we do with our Living Canopies to help help people, to help all people, because really the Living Umbrella is kind of helping like restaurants and botanical gardens, and it's kind of upper white middle class type of demographic. And I thought, why don't we just put these on bus shelters? And we started looking around, and if you look at where bus stops are, there's 500,000 bus stops in the United States, but there's only 100,000 shelters. And if you just went out here on the main roads in Bethesda, you would see there's a lot of bus stops without any kind of protection for people. And you can find lots of articles. The Post has done great articles about it. About basically, there's a segment of population that relies on public transportation, and they're not getting the benefit of having these shelters. So over the last couple of years, last 2 years, we've been working hard and developing this cool green shelter for bus stops. We've gotten buy-in from the city of Hydesville to do the first demonstrations, which should be going in this fall. We've been working with a group in East Baltimore, one of the more impoverished neighborhoods in the city there on North Avenue. And if you look at North Avenue, it's the main thoroughfare, east-west thoroughfare in Baltimore. I mean, it's concrete. It's almost a football size wide strip of concrete. You take the road and the sidewalks, no vegetation whatsoever. So there's really this huge need to fix the urban heat island problem and the air quality problem that exists around these. So we're really excited to launch the bus shelters as a product. We took it to the Maryland Municipal League conference back in June and got a lot of great feedback and interest from cities and towns around the state. So we're working our way through to try to really develop it and commercialize it, and would love to talk to people here about it as well as these guys here. They've got, I'm sure, a lot of advice they could give me as well. So I'll stop there. That's a lot about me and living Canopies, and so you have an idea of what I'm into.
No, I appreciate you giving that perspective. I think they're really cool innovations, and it's been fun to watch you grow over the years, I'll say that. Brad, I'd like to go ahead and move to you now, and I'd like to ask this general question. How has the real estate industry reacted to climate pressures and efficiency concerns? Have you seen that from your perspective?
Well, they've certainly been responding. I'll just back up for like 30 seconds. So I came out of real estate private equity. I grew up in Chevy Chase. I went to BCC over there. Spent 20 years in real estate private equity, started at a firm called JMB in Chicago, which at the time was the largest real estate firm in the country, and was at Starwood Capital for a long time running their international business. And this business has always been about historically driving top line, your rents, your market, your lease up, your occupancy. And in 2008, that collapsed. So the great financial crisis, top line just collapsed. And we sort of said, wait, there's a bottom half of the income statement. Let's look at that. It's like expenses. Well, you can spend a lot of time trying to grow your top line, but if you reduce your expenses by $1, you've got $1. And the idea was integrate technology in the built environment, drive your operating costs down, your EBITDA up. And if you did it right, you get this co-benefit of sustainability, climate, but you did it for the financial reasons. But there was no firm sort of thinking about it the way real estate and private equity wanted. So my wife and I, who had met at JMB, started this firm in 2011. And we historically have focused on investors. About 90% is leading investors, about 10% is US government. And the investors we work with, if you show them how basically if they give you $1, you'll give them $2 back, they will basically ask you how many dollars can they give you. There is no limit. Nobody says, I don't have the money. They're like, so if we give you $1 billion, you're going to give us $2 billion. And they all think of themselves as good value-add investors, so they're responding. When you start to show them there's a business case for us, they're doing this. Now, on top of that, you've got regulation, you've got the capital markets, which I referenced before, driving a lot of it. They have no problem investing to improve climate, but what's driving them is more than anything else the financial outcomes. But we've sort of demonstrated that you can drive a financial outcome and a climate outcome at the same time. They're not incompatible. Sort of, from a design point of view, this idea of integrated design. If you know what you're solving for at the beginning, then you can solve for both at the same time. If you don't, if you sort of add something late, like if you're building a building and say, when you're topping it out, oh, wouldn't it be great, if we made our lobby, 10 feet higher? That's really hard. If you say, well, we want a 20-foot lobby before you design it and build it, that's not a problem. And so we've seen them responding, pretty significantly. We've grown the company 50% in the last year. And we've got a team of more than 50 people, in Asia, Europe, and the Americas right now, all responding to clients. I mean, all of it has been in response to it. The clients we work with want more. The clients that sort of worked with us in the past but forgot about us, like, hey, sorry I didn't return. I'm getting emails with replies like from 3 years ago. And it's like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
And then every week we get somebody who basically says, hey, I got your name from somebody. This is what I need. Can I get a proposal like today? So there's this rapid acceleration because people are recognizing that if they do it right, they've got a business that's worth more. If they do it wrong, some of them may not exist in 3 or 4 years because, in a world where, let's say that, 90% of real estate was occupied before interest rates in COVID, and demand's gone down by 10%. That means if you round the numbers up, 90% was occupied before, now it's going to be 80%. That's 11% of the buildings are going to have no use. And I know DC is looking at a lot of adaptive reuse around housing. A lot of these office buildings aren't really well designed for housing, either where they are, the ceiling heights, or a lack of light. But even to a good building, you have to invest. You've got to invest because frankly, the clients and the stakeholders want more. We were in a world before it was like 2 stakeholders. You own a building, I sign the lease, that's it. Now, I sign the lease, it's my employees, it's my customers, my supply chain, my investors. It's the planning officials. In DC, Department of Planning won't even look at your application until the ANC signs off. The ANC gets elected by like 300 people. So 300 people are basically making the difference between whether you can build your project, whether you can get a variance to, add on a floor. So you have to appease everybody. Now, if you do it right, you've got a business and an asset that's worth a lot more. But it's a much more complicated world. And frankly, for most people we work with, as sophisticated as they are, it's a pretty terrifying world. Because they're not used to having, somebody who lives in an apartment building near their project basically determine whether they can build their building or not. But if you align with the community's values, you align with their aspirations, you might get your permit faster, you might get more. Certainly Montgomery County is doing that. You align with us, you work with us, we'll give you a lot of things. If you don't, best of luck to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for giving your perspective here. Jörg, I'd like to go ahead and move over to you. So, as we know, you're an expert in all things green roofs. I think one of the things that we're also going to see in the future is changing weather patterns. I mean, it's something that we've seen even in the last few weeks, as Dave mentioned, hail coming in all of our summer thunderstorms. I don't remember that always happening. So over time, how do different types of green roofs endure against the changing weather patterns and intense heat as well that's caused by climate change?
This is a very good question, and I monitor a lot of green roofs. I have done, but also others have done, whether they are in Germany or whether they are in the US. And just for the last 2 years, I can say the green roofs in the US are doing better. The original installation, not only it was really expensive, but it was done very poor and a very kind of a monoculture of plants. But then they are not getting maintained, and with the weather changes here, with the stronger rain kind of every other week, except in May, I think, where we had 6 weeks almost no rain. But with that, these roofs create a diversity. And I got a lot of calls from clients, and they say, oh, our roof looks horrible because it doesn't look anymore like a nicely manicured lawn. There's suddenly other plants coming up, and then I go there and said, well, this is great, this is perfect. And yesterday I was on a project like that, where we started to maintain to a green roof with a high diversity, and where they, at the end, and this will be starting with next year, where they only mow the entire vegetation down once a year, and then it's done. And taking basically the clippings out, what they mow down, to reduce the nutrient content, and then we have a a very high diversity, but it doesn't look like a nicely manicured lawn, what most buildings have in front of their building. But these kind of monoculture green roofs with the low growing sedums and everything else needs to go. These roofs need so much maintenance that also a lot of people, and also from an investor point of view, they say, okay, it cost me already a fortune. It is nice and green and beautiful at the beginning, but then the maintenance cost, and this is what I tell landscapers, they should do maintenance on green roofs, because in less than 5 years they can make the same revenue what the green roof has cost just by doing the maintenance, and they are not even bringing the material for the green roof. So it's a really profitable business to do the maintenance, but this is also something where I say I like these people and I want to have them making a living from the green roofs, but on the other hand side I have also the clients in my mind, and when I give a client a high biodiversity on a green roof, and this is only maintained once a year, then they are much more likely to sign off that. And in Germany, this is what I saw over the last 5-6 years on projects I have done. I mean, some projects I still monitor, I have done 40 years ago, and I'm still almost every other year there and take a look at. Now with a drone it's much easier, you just fly up the drone and take a picture and take a look at it. But a lot of these green roofs, they have suffered also at the beginning of the year, because they use at some time, and I did that also maybe 35 years ago, we used very thin layers of green roof media, and these systems, they are really challenged. So they are challenged basically from starting in February, March until June, July even, and then they slowly recover. And these are all systems where I think people have to go back at some point and add a thicker layer of the soil. It's not the water content that challenges the plants, it's typically the temperature. When you have a very thin layer of soil and a very intense sun coming in, the entire soil heats up much more, and plants can survive. I mean, you see them in the asphalt, sometimes in cracks in the asphalt growing, where the asphalt is really, really hot, you cannot even touch it. Important for the plants is that the roots stay cool. Then they have their own little air conditioning going on and they can survive. But if the system is too shallow and it heats up too much, then they have no chance to turn on their air conditioning. It's then almost a heater for them and they will not make it. So I think in a lot of green roofs in the US are very well prepared for climate change. Also the way it changes, that we have this heavy rains. So, and if I allow these green roofs to have a natural succession, that means from this little succulent type of plants to some other plants, and then control this succession at a higher level, I have a higher evaporation rate and a much higher stormwater retention. So it would all everything would be nice. It's all about the people, that they understand you have more a meadow up there and not an nice English lawn. This is all. So in the US, I think the green roofs are mostly resilient, in my opinion, at least for the next 20 or 30 years even, at least longer than the waterproofing would last without a green roof.
Right. And
probably longer than the building will be existing in some cases. So in Germany there's more challenges, but this is also, as they started earlier, they were too much relying that the climate will not change, but I think it changes in many regards in Germany faster than here. And when I say that changes, they have the heavy weather events, but with a much longer drought in between and much higher heat. Here it's a little bit more balanced, so to speak, but we never know.
I mean, Jörg touches on, I think, a really interesting point, sort of the business case, because historically, I think people first came to green roofs because they wanted a green roof, they thought it was important. Now you're seeing, in a time of more volatile climate, the stormwater charges are likely going to rise, because now the same amount of rain is coming in shorter periods of time. There's more runoff. You either have to have more infrastructure or you have to have more green roof to basically hold it. And so the charges will go up, which will make the roof more valuable. tenants also, want a more amenity-rich world if they're going to return to the office. And so historically, the roofs were not an amenity. There wasn't even a space that anybody went to. Now more and more you're seeing, whether it's a title sort of tenant that gets access to the roof, or everybody has an amenity. There's a lot more interest, and people are using it more. They want to get out more. There's cognitive, associations with more green space and biophilia. It's like everything is going in the right direction for green roofs right now.
Absolutely. I want to add one thing, what I didn't mention at the beginning, where I just said with the bird eye view, we are always focused on the cities. Sure, the cities have a big issue that it needs to be nice for the people that they stay there and don't move outside and make the suburbs and destroy everything out there. So you always want to have as much people in the city as possible, because then they are contained, but that means you have to make it also as nice as possible for them. But what I think when it comes to the green roof, and also regulation covers right now everything a little bit, I think we have to start thinking in the US about watersheds. So we have to say, okay, in this watershed, this is the regulation. Because what I see right now when it comes to a big warehouse, they are not going downtown DC because it's too expensive. And then they don't want to go on the whatever, Baltimore side or something like that. No, then they go rather to Pennsylvania, where there's no regulations at all, where they can waste a lot of space, and then they drive with their trucks on 83 or 95 every morning back and forward. This is cheaper. So I think we have to start looking at watersheds, and then we have, for example, the Susquehanna River, then we have already same regulations in 5 or 6 states, I don't know how many, or Chesapeake watershed, Then we have one regulation within the watershed, and then everybody sees the responsibility to it.
Yeah, which is something that some organizations are working towards. I would point to like your typical Chesapeake Bay Foundation and Chesapeake Bay Alliance and everything. But that's a great point, that you bring it from a different perspective rather than the city perspective of this is my city and this is what I affect. You actually affect a much broader range of that when you look at the watershed as a whole.
Yeah, and it seems a little bit too big and too complicated for people, because then there's more counties involved, more states involved and all that stuff. Yeah. But we have to start thinking this way. It is impossible that you can do in northern Maryland, somewhere close to the border to whatever borders there, Pennsylvania, that you can do whatever you want, and then we have the problem. And we have enough problems in the first place. We don't want to deal with these problems too. So I think it can be, and it contributes all to a better situation in all levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only downstream, so it's already there.
Yeah, both up and down. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and turn to you guys as the audience. You should have a grasp from now of where each of our speakers come from, of their perspectives on and their different takes on green infrastructure. And I'd kind of like to open up the floor. Did anybody come with any burning questions? Is anything coming to mind? Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the possibilities of making money off climate change, or supporting the organizations, the businesses that are trying to do something about climate change. There's a mutual fund called iClean, ICLN. It's got maybe $5 billion in it. I've been looking at it's focused on renewable energy. And it seemed like a good investment to me, but for the last year, the price on that fund has been going down and down and down. So I don't have an explanation for that. It seems to me like that fund, which is focused on renewable energy, which has 134 companies, some of it is generating, and some of it is transmitting, and some of it is the IT part of it. But it seems like that should be a good investment, but it doesn't look like it.
I suppose it depends on sort of what you're trying to accomplish. The problem with the public markets is that, the company can do the exact same business for a year, and its price can change dramatically depending on how people perceive the value of it. And if you're investing in it, because you want to reduce greenhouse gases, and the mutual fund is largely thinking about financial return, unless they've been given some other mandate. And it's you know, a lot of the ESG climate, you know, mutual funds are really tricky because they're often relying on third-party ratings, you know, and someone just, you'll sit there and go, well, I didn't expect to be investing in, you know, a manufacturing company I'm perceived as bad, but because they have a good ESG program where they're doing, you know, renewable packaging, they get higher ratings. You know, some of the oil and gas companies, because they're focused on reducing their carbon footprint, even though their footprint is massive, get really high ratings on sort of ESG and climate. And some people invest in these funds and they're really surprised to find a lot of oil companies in them. So it's tricky. I wish I had a better answer, but it's hard and often leads to very unintended consequences.
Yeah, right over here.
I have a question regarding green roofs. I don't know too much about it. I work for a condominium and we recently replaced our roof, and I was just wondering if we got a green roof, when it comes time to replace the roof, then how do you do that with a green roof?
Yeah, so in general what people say, and I can confirm it from projects in Germany, when you have a green roof on top of the roofing and when it's done nicely, I mean, the roofing material is not exposed anymore to the weather and to the sunlight and all that stuff, then the roofing typically lasts at least 2 times or 3 times longer. So that means in a time frame when you change your roofing without a green roof is around maybe 20 years. In this case it would extend to 40 or even 50, maybe even longer. I mean, I have no project that's 60 years because I'm not, well, I'm just over 60, but I didn't start that early. But at least 45 years I can certainly say that I have enough projects that I have this age. So that means you are skipping actually a replacement, but then when you have to replace the roofing, let's say in half a century, then you have to remove the green roof also. And for me, for example, it is important, there's many green roof systems out there, and a lot of systems use also a lot of plastic elements and certain products that are difficult to recycle. But you can also build a green roof with materials that can be 100% recycled and then brought back up on the roof with new plants, and then you have it. So certainly when you replace the roof, you have to remove the green roof, absolutely. And I always recommend removing the green roof not on one side of the building and then fixing this and then going back. I have seen projects where roofs caved in because people did that. This is not so good. So rather take it off. And yeah, so this is not that much more money, but it's important. And the second question that might come when it comes to leaks, how do we fix leaks on a roof? I think this is often the second question. All my projects, I have typically a leak detection system in there. So first of all, if there's a roofing manufacturer involved who wants to build this roof, they typically try to sell you a warranty for their roofing. I ask them in the next step, how much cheaper is it without a warranty, the roofing? And the warranty is nothing else than an insurance. That means the roofing manufacturer pays an insurance company, whatever, $1 per square foot, and he sells it to you for $2. And for that cheaper price, so to speak, without warranty, you can install typically a leak detection system, and you get even often a discount in your building insurance when you have a leak detection system installed, because with this system you can at the end pinpoint the hole or the breach of the membrane under the green roof, and then you can fix it directly there. This is on a couple projects at the very beginning. I have that done, and I remember at the beginning a lot of roofing manufacturers were upset with me. I was not always their friend. I mean, I'm still not their friend, but it's a different story. I just wanted to say, I think it's important that when you have a green roof, it doesn't need to be roofing manufacturer business as usual. You can make it better. And the first project I did and introduced this system to the US was actually, or is actually, in a way that the insurance company every 5 years pays the company to test the roof for leaks. Even if they feel no leaks, they test it, and this is all for free. The insurance company paid for that.
Just that, the Montgomery County Green Bank actually promotes green roofs and has programs to put them in place. You're likely to see stormwater runoff fees, from here in the county. Those will be lower with the green roof. The property values, we could argue about how much it goes up. I don't think we should be arguing that it's going to go down. A green roof is not going to be negative for the property value. We just have to have a discussion about how much it goes up. So there's lots of reasons to do it. There's also biophilia, there's bees, there's wildlife. It's just, better. And it's something, I think one of the reasons these guys are here is because they're seeing demand for what they do is rising pretty significantly in this world. We're fortunate to live in a fairly progressive community that cares about these things, that basically equates green roofs, green canopies, to better outcomes, whether it's health, educational attainment, cognitive ability. We can have a discussion about how much those are being impacted, but we can't, I think, argue that there's not an impact or there's a negative impact.
So if you have a building that has no green roof at the moment and it's got a roof, is it wise to put a green roof on top of an existing roof, or should you start fresh with a new roof and then the green roof?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the green roof has a specific weight because it not only the material, but it also holds water, and water has also a specific weight. That's everywhere the same on Earth. This is the good thing. So this number is the same everywhere. But I always recommend that the roofing, ideally the roofing is first replaced when it comes to a green roof, and then a green roof can be considered. The structural load is often, in most projects I know, the handicap. When it's an existing building and they want to have a green roof up there, but a very limited structural load, and increasing that on an existing building is a little bit challenging. I made some ideas for row houses, for example. There would be a potential how you could span row houses with one big roof above it, and then it sits on the walls. But this was also in Baltimore, and these row houses, they seem solid, but they are not. You can almost not do anything there. But what I'm saying is, when you have the intention to install a green roof and you did your roof 5 years ago, then I would rather wait another 15 years with it.
And that's the big question. Whether it's renewables or whether it's a green roof, is the age of the roof.
Yeah.
If it's sort of, inside 4 or 5 years, relatively easy, lots of warranty, pretty good condition. If it's over 15 years, relatively easy, you're going to always replace it in conjunction with one or the other. The challenge is sort of between, 5 and 15 years. But I would think that most architects, most MEPs today are designing dead loads to either accommodate a green roof or some sort of on-site renewable. That they're increasingly sensitive to, there's a use for the roof, and so they want to add that. And we've certainly seen projects where they're going in and they're adding that structural capability because they want the optionality of a green roof or renewables. They may not do it initially, but it's a lot easier to, again, do it up front and have the optionality because a tenant may want it or other stakeholders versus having no ability to sort of integrate one or two of those. Because I think you're seeing those are pretty common uses of roofs today. People are doing something on the roof today, which wasn't always the case. In the past, it was like you had no access to it. There was some equipment on it. Nobody went up there. The access might be a little staircase that telescopes. Now everyone's got stairs. Elevators are running to it. They expect something to be going on the roof.
No, on that latter point, I'm curious if I were a private business owner with a building and I had a choice of, do I paint my roof white and reflect energy? Do I put solar panels in there? Do I put a green roof? What is motivating my decision making? Is it government policy right now, or is it private return on investment? How critical is government policy at the local, state, and federal level in driving these decisions? Or have we reached a tipping point where, to your point, that it's free money right now? So I'm just curious about the decision-making process and what's motivating me as a private person in my decision-making.
Yeah, I am not in all these regulations and incentives and all that stuff, because I'm walking across the United States and everybody is cooking a different thing. At the end, everybody is cooking with water, obviously, but everybody has it done differently, and there's no uniformity. What I wish would be there, and even if it's a very simple, because everybody has somewhere the one simple baseline, and this would be good. But what I'm saying is, I'm looking that not from a business case for myself, but I looked at from a building owner perspective. And whether you have a reflective roof or a black roof or green roof or something like that, important is that the roof is insulated, maybe even better than the code. Then you have already a very good energy saving for your building. First, you look at your own building before you reflect something or whatever, heat up something, with your roof. This is my first thing. When you do a green roof, you should almost insulate even more, because your roof lasts much longer, and you want to meet regulations maybe in 20 or 30 years, because then your green roof is still there. You don't want to have your green roof, that's what I see on a lot of building, hardly any insulation, but a green roof, and then they think they save a lot of energy. They save, might be on the upper floor, some energy, but they are not meeting close requirements and higher energy costs in 30 years. The green roof is still there, and you don't want to remove a green roof and add insulation and then bring it back. So this is one thing. And then with a green roof, and I think we have said that you can utilize this space for additional purposes. And even if it's just a seasonal, where you can have certain things up there, and then solar and green roof you can combine also. And that means with the green roof below the solar panels, you create a better efficiency of the solar panels. So there's a trade-off. And then you have the stormwater. So I think, and in DC it's coming up more and more with the combination solar and green roofs. This is also, DC has the highest incentives for the solar. It makes absolutely sense to do a combination there from the incentives, as far as I know. If you're somewhere else, it's difficult to do it, but I would have a structural solid roof, well insulated, and then the roofing doesn't matter. And ideally it's a roofing that's already root resistant, that you don't need any additional plastic layer, that you even come back in 5 years or 6 years and say, okay, now I put a green roof there, or a combination green roof or solar, or just solar. I think for building owner, my opinion, it's important to have the full flexibility and the full spectrum, and I think this creates the most value to a building also.
Well, I think just a little bit about the the white roof versus the green roof, and the kind of science behind that, looking at the energetics. We actually studied the Friends School over on Kenilworth Avenue in College Park, and they had white roof and green roof. And, white roof is very reflective. It helps with the kind of the cooling, but what happens is it ages really quickly. It deteriorates in terms of reflectivity, so that kind of declines over time. And it's obviously not providing any of the other ecosystem services that a green roof would be, in terms of the the pollinator habitat, the kind of the feel good, as well as the transpiration and the stormwater management. So for me, it's kind of like, I don't know why a white roof makes sense in certain situations, but if you can do a green roof, that's probably your choice rather than trying to do a white roof.
And just for black, I think it sort of depends on where your building is. Like in New England, historically, people wanted a dark roof because it was going to help melt the snow. In Florida, you definitely want a white roof, and the question is just, where is that line? And we sit in a part of the country where that line sort of exists. I'd probably say it's much more likely white roof than dark roof, but that does go to it. I would also add that I don't like your question. Because I think it sets up, it's because you're either doing it for economics or you're doing it for regulation. I think regulation creates a business incentive to do things, and it creates winners and losers. So the minute there's stormwater runoff charges that green roofs mitigate, it also impacts the value of the asset, and it gets you on the right side of regulation. BEPS in DC and Montgomery County and Local Law 97 in New York, they are fundamentally carbon taxes that are a taking of equity. They've imposed a new, in some cases in New York, over $1 million of expense, which means your cash flow goes down by $1 million, which means at a 5 cap, which is how we think about real estate, you've lost $20 million of equity in your building. If you can start to peel that back, you start to get a business case for it. If it impacts your leasing, your rents, which is somewhat speculative, but certainly, people are occupying buildings that they prefer to be in, where the owners have made investments. So I think it's both. I no longer think it's one or the other. I think regulation creates, if done right, it creates financial incentives and winners and losers.
So I mean, is it being done right? And I think back to a meeting that I was at with developers who were all at an event to support affordable housing in Montgomery County, who, when speaking privately, said, well, we're actually building most of our developments in Northern Virginia because the regulations are too onerous here in Montgomery County. So getting regulations right seems to me very important as well. And I don't know if you can speak locally, do we have it right? Are we incentivizing, developers in a way that they are here and building versus other jurisdictions that we're competing with?
Well, I'll make an interesting point. I mean, Europe historically was really heavy stick. Like, if you didn't do it, we're going to fine you, you're going to cost you. The U.S. was largely sort of carrot. Like, the rebates and incentives, whether it was Pepco or other jurisdictions, they largely went to people who were already doing it, and it didn't get the people who were reluctant to do it to act. And so what you're seeing in the U.S. with all this climate legislation in cities is mostly the stick now. It's like, we tried incentivizing you to do it, giving you money, you didn't do it, so we're just going to basically fine you now. And so you're seeing these big financial penalties come from it. You could make the argument that it's easier to build in Northern Virginia, but probably the rents are lower. And so is it worth extra work and more cost to work in Montgomery County because your revenue will be higher? We think a lot about life cycle versus first cost. Cheaper in Northern Virginia, but from a life cycle point of view, it may be more profitable to build, in Montgomery County. But there are vast differences. When you look at the utility costs historically, Northern Virginia Dominion was half of what Montgomery County and Pepco were. But that meant that the energy project actually made more sense here. Pepco gave 25-30% rebates and incentives. Dominion was cheap. You got no rebates and incentives historically. Your cap rate was different. Your rents were different. So I don't know that it's all that simple. But certainly we're seeing the more progressive owners, the more sophisticated owners, are making a lot of investments around climate and resiliency now because they fundamentally know it's profitable.
Any other?
That's a tie-in. I was going to ask, I think you've all touched on the fact that a lot of green infrastructure measures make good business sense. So not just climate sense, but business sense. And this is a room where we're all saying, yes, they do. But when we're not in this room, what are the most common counterpoints or pushback that you get?
Well, from my from my end, I can say when I'm working with developers that are building a structure and then reselling it 2 or 3 years later, then the green roof is out because they don't want to have this cost. So my first question when I have a potential client on the phone or on the email, I ask them, do you want to keep the building or you want to sell it? And then when they say it's a keeper, then I said, okay, then we can get in business. If they say, we just build it, it needs to be cheap on every corner, and then it will be sold, and then it will be sold to the next one. There's this whole group when it comes to so many type of buildings that are going through so many hands, everybody makes a cut, and I said, I'm not the guy who can help you with that. Because I don't want to also build something where I have no access anymore, where there's no relationship to it. I want to help the building owner and not some people who want to just make a quick profit with selling a building.
I think for us, from a very small kind of startup point of view for example, with the cool beam shelters for the bus stops, usually the cities are cash strapped. I mean, historically they weren't buying bus shelters. They've kind of farmed it out to the advertising agencies to pay for them. So that's difficult, but they're excited to do it, and when there's grant money available, they'll jump jump on the chance to do it, whether it's federal or some of the state programs. But I think that for us, the challenge really is being able to bring in the corporations to be able to sponsor the bus stops. And so we're looking at an alternative kind of business model there to bring in that cash to be able to do it. I think just kind of the kind of practical standpoint, you see kind of pushback when you get beyond the early adopters to kind of the green people is the maintenance issue. They start looking at a canopy, they're like, okay, what's the bird habitat looking like? The bees, so, a lot of people have negative aspects of vegetation being above their head, so we ran into a lot of resistance there with especially certain segments of the population are just like, there's no way I would stand under that. Not my entire life would I stand under that. So as with other people are like, it's beautiful, right? So there's difference of opinion about how beautiful and practical nature can be and up close to you.
I mean, Jörg makes a really interesting point, the sort of distinction between what I call the merchant builder, basically somebody who builds it and pre-sells it right off the pro forma, versus someone like an occupier, a university, or a corporate that's going to own it forever. And they have very different perspectives. Investors don't really care about the green roof's impact on cognitive ability, on reducing sick days, on the productivity of their workforce. University, that's their whole game, is their people. And then, corporates, the Amazons and Metas, the big pharmaceutical companies, they care a lot about this as well. We think about them very differently. And so, again, the nature of the investor, the nature of the owner, the horizon matters. Doesn't mean one's better than the other. It just, again, you have to meet them where they are, and you have to understand what they care about, because they don't care about the same things.
Mm-hmm.
We probably have time for one final question if anybody wants to wrap us up. Go ahead.
In support of your question, and I'm not picking on any one of you.
Well, that's for looking at me when he said that.
Yeah. Actually, we're going to have lunch this Friday. Is any one of you driving electric cars?
Driving electric car. I ride my bicycle.
Is it electric?
That's people powered.
Okay. Good. Okay.
For 10 years. I
Good.
started in a Volt. Johnny Orsman Volt, a very, very long time ago.
Good. Okay. Good. Yeah, and I'll just add, we put projects together all over the country, all over the world, and a lot of the questions you're asking, very much in line with what the public wants to know. I believe there's a huge disconnect between regulators here in this country. You notice you're talking about standards. In Europe, which I've done a lot of work there, it's very common. Somebody comes up with an idea, there's a rule, incentives, boom, boom, boom. It's explained. Here, because of the laws, jurisdictions, states, and all that, we get a patchwork of things going on. And in the process, it confuses the end user, in line with the questions you were asking. So one of my other questions was going to be, what do you all think is the biggest obstacle to get a lot of this work done? And my company has been doing renewable energy for 20 years now, and I've seen it. And I will tell you, there is a balance. You have to be able to bring in the ROI. It's changing a little bit. People are starting to see the benefits of sustainability and clean, having the ability to drink the water and breathe the air. But the ROI, 9.5 out of 10 groups and companies we deal with, still there. And by the way, green roofs are starting to take, green roofs can help not replace a roof, like extend the life. So there are, in certain cases, and there are values. Those things are coming out.
Well, for us, for us, it's not 9.5 out of 10. It's 10 out of 10 is about ROI. But we know how to talk about it, because we do believe unequivocally that you can do both at the same time.
Yeah, I agree.
But for the large part, if there's not a business case for it, they won't do it. But I think the cool thing about the last 10 years has been the expansion of what ROI means. It's no longer just about rents. Insurance comes up. More and more, health, depending on the nature of the groups you're talking to.
I agree.
So it's a much more expanded sort of view of stakeholders and where return comes from.
And the articulation and explanation makes a big difference. To go to a second statement beyond, especially with real estate folks. First question, expenses, how fast, and whatever.
They're not anti-climate. They're just basically tell us the business case. They're also fiduciaries. They're greedy.
Yeah.
But they're happy to do the right thing so long as it's not going to cost them a lot, or it's not going to cost their investors a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, this is I'll leave politics aside, but this is the question a lot of pension funds and fiduciaries are asking, because they're defined benefit programs. They've got to pay money to people and retirees. Should they be giving up return? I mean, theoretically, anytime you put any adjective against an investment strategy, you're giving up return. If you say everything but tobacco, well, you wouldn't invest in tobacco unless you had a better return, and so you're theoretically giving up something. Or you're saying only for climate impacts or only for this or for that. And it's a tough issue. We've just fundamentally believe that if you do it right, it's profitable. This is what good value-added investors do. They look for ways to reduce their costs, drive their cash flow, and they get these other benefits, which is exactly what we're all providing up here.
Right.
Some of it's narrower, some of it's more broad. But nobody should be doing something that's not in their interest. It's a question of defining sort of what does it mean to be in their interest, I think.
So Dave and Jörg, do you have answers to that final question?
I think just briefly,
obstacles?
Yeah, I mean, just building on what Brad said, I think it's a lot about thinking beyond what ROI is and really what is return. And it's really about the public good and public benefit that you're providing. Green infrastructure, everybody's benefiting, right? So who pays for it? And I see in our challenges is really how do you expand it to populations that are historically underserved? I mean, this is, it's egregious what's happened in the United States over our history, and making amends for that. I don't know if we're anywhere close to making the right choices yet for making that better. So there's a big challenge there, I think, to expand green infrastructure to different places.
Right this minute, I'm working with one of the states in the middle of the country that I won't name. I'm dealing with at the governor's level office, big projects trying to do. In one of our conversations, I was asked not to put the word sustainability in our communication because it will get shut down. I could say I can bring clean energy, I can bring in efficiency, but if I use sustainability, it'll be guaranteed to be shut down.
So, I just redid a contract where I was asked to take the word ESG out and change it to energy management.
There you go.
Like literally, go back to the Word document, search and replace, re-sign it.
Yeah.
Because they're getting ready to go out fundraising and they don't want to have ESG anywhere because Florida's public pension, Texas, and a few others are just spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to save like $1,000.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for a shareholder lawsuit from a beneficiary that says these pension funds are wasting their money to get to get much return, but we haven't seen that yet.
Exactly. And thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. Right on the money.
It's very easy.
Jörg, as far as obstacles.
Yeah, with the obstacles in the green roof market, I see that the entire green roof industry, as it started to grow in around 2000 in the US, a lot of roofing manufacturers were grabbing this part into their roofing because their roofing is typically the worst product you can have in an environment. And with a little bit green on top of it, they look green. It's kind of this green coat what they put on. And they control most projects in the market here. And that means the green roof on these projects, but also on other projects are typically in a very poor quality, but to a price that's right now as an average 3 to 4 times higher what you pay in Germany for a green roof. And in green roof you pay for gasoline approximately 3 times more than here in the US. So this is one thing, and with that green roof installers, or even for landscaping companies or people who like green roofs and want to do that, it's not very attractive for them to go into this business, because their profit margin for the work they are doing, and this is actually the muscle work and the organization of, in a downtown city, putting a crane and all the safety stuff, it's not always paying back very well for them. For all the roofing corporations who have their own system and try to sell it there, they make a good profit. They can even sell 5 or 6 sales reps on the side of it and giving an architect a kickback. They spend a lot of money, and that's a big hurdle here in this market. If the cost, and this was always in my interest, to cut the costs down, because my hometown Stuttgart in Germany did exactly that. The green roof costs were relatively high, so they made a program to cover all schools and kindergartens and everything. I did in only one part of the city more than 1 million square feet in 3 years with green roofs, and the price dropped really dramatically, and then suddenly they could go back to the people and to corporations and say, you must have a green roof, it's cheap, you know, you can afford that. And this is what I have never seen here. It's actually the opposite way around. The prices go up, they are putting all kind of different materials in there, and one hand side it's the regulations, because architects and stormwater engineers, they always want a data.
Right.
From a natural green infrastructure system, I don't need data. I'm not a big friend of data, because I know how much it retains. Yeah. And optimizing that will change my entire natural environment, and a lot of people don't see that, and then I have issues. And I don't need from NASA developed sponging elements or something like that to grow the plants better and to have a more consistent data. In 5 years, when the plant have a natural succession, all these data are obsolete anyway. You are much better.
I'm going to take you with me to one of our communities here. We'll get it done.
Okay, yeah,
but don't disrespect data. Data is good.
No, I don't disrespect them, but I am not into this
I understand.
hype of data.
Yeah, we go overboard
this is
sometimes.
This is always the killing argument. You know, when I go somewhere and talk to an architect, and then, oh, do you have data on that? And then, oh, come on, you know.
I also ran an engineering group in Germany for 3 years. And they go sometimes the other way, too much.
Yeah.
Well, I just would make the point. I know we were on time. You know, data is really important. And I'm not suggesting you don't agree with that. But more than anything else, it's about making data actionable. It's not collecting as much data as possible. It's like, does the data tell you something? Does it give you an insight? Does it lead you in a direction? And does it at the end tell you if you were successful in whatever intervention there was?
No, I get that. And you know, I have participated in a lot of research in Germany before it even started here. And then I was the consultant for the first green roof research at Penn State University. And I looked at all this research in Michigan and Maryland and all that stuff. And when I look at it, I mean, some of them, they do the research on a green roof for 6 months. That's nonsense anyway. When I'm telling people a green roof lasts 40 years and you make a test for 6 months, this is ridiculous, you know.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, what I'm saying is all the results, they were plus minus all in the same range. And at the end, and this is the main reason it comes down to stormwater retention, you can say, and this is what DC is a little bit trying with the thickness of the soil of the system, this retains so much water. And when somebody says, no, mine retains 12% more, then I go back to this person and say, okay, then you can tell me how the weather on my 80th birthday is. Because they are using weather data from the past, but this will all change anyway. Yeah. And I don't care whether it's 60% water retention or 72 or something like that. It is always in a range. We cannot control the rain, we cannot control the weather pattern. So when it comes to green, living green infrastructure, we can produce data, and we have a lot of data, but we shouldn't nail it down that this system is 5% better on a standard value. This is people optimizing. That's what I say. I mean, I have seen projects with foam and developed from NASA, retains a lot of water. You know, they built it. I mean, this green roof is not existing anymore, and then they went viral with that, how much water this retains and all that stuff. Well, this is all good, but then when you plant succulent type of plants on a bed of water, this is not going very well. You know, it's like putting a water plant in the desert. I mean, it's just, you know, they pick one element and pull it out, and that's where some of the data really go viral, where I say, okay, I don't want to deal with the data because I know the performance range, and this is the important thing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut us there. Please stick around, hang out, please eat. We have wonderful vegan cookies provided by Red Bandana Bakery. They're both chocolate chip as well as Hamantaschen, which I did not look up and I should have.
Oh, yes.
Sherry.
Hamantaschen isn't a flavor, but it's a shape of cookie. And
Yeah.
inside usually has jam or
I
chocolate.
believe it's raspberry.
Yeah, raspberry.
I do want to remind everybody that this is number 2 of a 3-part series. So our third session will be happening next Thursday. And it's funny that you guys get into data, because what we will be talking about is the use of artificial intelligence in climate solutions. Pretty hot button topic right now. We have a couple of researchers as well as a businesswoman coming out who have all used AI and machine learning technologies in order to map wetlands, to map Arctic recession, I almost want to call it, as well as other climate model tipping points, those kind of things. So please come back and join us. We're a very friendly, welcoming group, I hope. And please drink and eat and be merry.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.